far outweighs the space that you lose. In these buildings, typically they are very large, high ceilings, and they're not very noticeable at all. It's also important to remember that it wouldn't be on all four walls of a room, because you're only treating the external walls. So typically it would be one, maybe even two walls. So it wouldn't be all four. If it was 3 inches off every single wall, then yes, there might be some concern there, but it's not. It's typically one, maybe even two. That's it. Thanks, Javier.
Thanks, Bina. You have another question. This is from Claire. She's going to ask about measuring the actual savings in a test property.
Hi, Bina. Thank you very much for your presentation. Very interesting. I was wondering whether before you actually launch Orbis, you plan to back up your analysis by making actual measurements. So you've got some CMVP going on.
Yeah, absolutely. We are in the process of, well, we were meant to start those, but obviously we haven't been able to as of yet. But there are several pilot studies which we are hoping to run, which will back up all our claims. We take measurements during, before, during installation and after. Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Can I ask over what period you'd be doing that? I mean, for how long would you be measuring the savings?
For how long we'd be measuring savings?
Yeah.
I think we may have done some work around that already. David, do you know anything on that at all?
Realistically, trials need to be done in the winter time, where we've got a decent temperature differential. But really, the measurement is just confirming the accuracy of the calculations. And the calculations that we're using have been tried and tested now for several decades. So there's no reason to suppose that it's not accurate. We've plugged up all of the infiltration losses in the system. As long as we can get a temperature gradient across the insulated member, we'll be able to measure the heat loss through it. And we are discussing with RGU as part of the next part of the program of testing to do that. We're just awaiting a few business things to get sorted.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Claire. I can see that there's a couple of questions as well from Alison and Tero around the same sort of thing. Are there avenues for funding insulation in your property, and does your new product qualify for these? Also, Alison asking, can you market it to the government staff so it is part of their grant scheme pushed by them? On both of those, yes, absolutely. We are looking at all sorts of avenues of funding that could possibly open up for us, things like eco-funding, for example. Funding that would allow people who maybe are on low incomes or on benefits that can get some sort of grant for this, and that would ideally happen directly through us, so they can apply for those directly through us. We think our insulation does qualify for those, but we are in the process of putting those in place at the moment. As far as marketing it to the government staff, again, we are in discussions with councils, housing associations and staff as well.
Yeah, I'll just come in on that a little bit. For domestic properties, for it to come under Eco 3, the product needs to get certification, and this is proving quite issue. The costs and the response time of the certifying bodies is horrific. If we're using it in a commercial premises, however, this one for you, Claire, the Energy Savings Trust or Resource Efficient Scotland will provide their loan package to commercial premises for this system as it stands. But we don't need certification for the general public who are paying it for themselves, but certification that needs to get that for Eco 3 funding as part of the program.
Okay, moving on. Claire's next in line again. She has a question for Dave asking about the usefulness of solar thermal. You want to go ahead, Claire?
Yes, hello, Dave. Dave, you talked about using solar thermal to top up the tank, the thermal store, so that you could use it in your central heating. But like PV, you generate so much less in winter, so much less heat from solar thermal and so much less electricity from solar PV in winter. I was wanting to hear more from you about that balance between the summer and winter.
I think ultimately the net yield from solar thermal and solar PV in the winter is probably not that far apart, and it's just a given. We've installed solar thermal before, and generally the limit on solar thermal has actually been in the we can't use it for heating. Because we can put it through a water tank, then the case for using it in the winter months, because the net conversion efficiency on solar thermal is around 75 to 80%, whereas on PV is down about 18 to 20%, so conversion of the sun. So kind of those two factors balance each other out. Solar thermal on its own when you've got PV is debatable whether it's worthwhile, whether it's you're better off just sticking with solar, increasing the capacity there, but it has a grid constraints. Solar thermal as a technology, however, is grossly underestimated in many other applications beyond just the domestic setting. And that solar, and particularly concentrated solar, actually offers huge opportunities, particularly in industries where they have a high drying load, where they need energy to dry. So concentrated solar thermal could probably be used a lot more in Scotland.
Can I ask you again? I'm still unsure. It seems as though what you're saying is that actually there's not much difference between summer and winter in terms of solar thermal output. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much. That's just a given. But the size.
Sorry, can you tell us why that's a given?
Because both of them depend on protons from the sun.
Right. My understanding is they depend on hours of daylight, which is why you generate about 75% of your solar electrical energy in the summer months, which leaves you very little in winter.
But you're using the same emissions from the sun. You're using the infrared element as opposed to the light element in the solar panels. So on a given day in wintertime, when the clouds, when it's darker, you're getting less solar power, either as infrared heat or as photons from the sun. So they're both subdued by the same amount. So if you look at the yield over the year, they're going to follow each other almost identically.
Absolutely, but then right, okay. I absolutely agree with you on that, but then I was wondering why you're suggesting that you'd use solar thermal to support your central heating, when in winter you need your central heating, but there isn't the energy from the sun in your solar thermal, or have I got that bit wrong?
But bear in mind, if you can put on a larger solar thermal array.
Yes, if you have a huge one.
Yeah, where you're putting in 16 solar PV panels, you might only put in 3 solar thermal. Concerned about yield in the winter months, there's nothing to stop you increasing that. You just got to manage the excess heat in the summer. There's lots of simple ways of doing that. The purpose of the exercise was more about illustrating the systems engineering approach to a property and showing how different systems can work together. And depending on the setting, you're going to choose the technologies to suit that setting and also take the energy demand. But you can be sure in December, we're getting, I think, about 1.8% of the annual yield for solar PV. It's going to be 1.8% for the solar thermal.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Tara, I have a question for you from Eric. It's about the price and capacity of a typical installation. If you'd like to go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, Tara, I was just wondering, when you're talking about these the power balancing installations, relating to the stuff that you guys install, what is the size and the cost of a typical domestic battery bank, say single house? Just trying to get an idea. I know nothing about it.
Yeah, this is one of the questions I answered before you asked it, and the answer is it depends. So it depends how much solar production capacity you have, what's your consuming profile, various things. So actually, sizing a battery is not as simple as we would like, and it can be very complicated because you don't want to install a small battery which will give you savings that are not satisfactory. And similarly, there's no point putting a huge battery in that you will never charge full. So, if you really need to drill into it, what's the right size of a battery for your house? It's quite time consuming and complicated. And, you see adverts on Facebook that will install this battery system for $2,500. Well, that's nonsense. It hasn't been sized. It's just they've taken a stock of batteries and flocking them off. So this is exactly where the social energy offer now comes in very handy, because it's a one-size battery for everybody, and the system is learning your consuming habits as it goes, and it's effectively using your power to make money for you. And that particular battery capacity is 4.5 kilowatt hours, and 10% from the top and 10% from the bottom is reserved for the grid balancing, leaving you only 3.6 kilowatt hour local storage. However, you will be benefiting from a largely reduced electricity bill. So question you want to ask yourself is, do you want to spend a lot of money just getting the design of your battery system to a T? Or do you want to just get a box standard solution which will manage your power the best way it can? But yes, I cannot give you an answer what's a typical battery price, because it really depends on each household. Social energy battery system, however, is around £4,500, and that's around there. It depends on the construction of the building. Where's the battery going in relation to the physical meter and the cable runs and the amount of man hours is required? But yeah, you can get one for £4,000, or it may be slightly over £4,500. But that's the best answer I can give you. What's the typical price, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. That helps.
Sarah, I've got to come back on that point about the battery from Alison. Alison, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so I was just wondering then, Taro, does a smart meter then help to know what size battery you should have, because then it will have a look at your energy usage? And with smart energy, I don't quite understand it yet. So what you're saying is that you have a small battery, you still need a battery, just a small one though, and then everything else just kind of goes through that. How does it actually work?
Another question I answered earlier, and the answer is I don't know, but it does work. Basically, by having a small local storage, it allows the battery to frequently charge it from the grid when there is excess power available from the grid. So today is a nice calm day, but if the battery system is talking to the weather station deciding tomorrow is going to be blowing a hoolie, like they say up here, it's going to buy power from the grid at a certain time when the wind is highest. It knows the wind turbines will be turning excess. And that's how you get price in, even for, you get electricity in for free, or in some cases the grid pays you to take the excess power. So you don't need a local massive storage. But the social energy offering, you could think about it in this way, because it is credited against your electricity bill. So instead of paying something like 17 or 18 pence per kilowatt hour, you end up effectively paying something like 4 pence per kilowatt hour. So it kind of distributes the consumption across every day of the year.
So Terry, does that mean then that what kind of costs, when do you pay back your initial investment then in relation to smart energy? So you basically, they come in, they install this small battery and kind of wire, cables and everything. And at what point do you pay back that initial investment?
Another good question, and the answer to that is it depends. It depends how much you're producing, how much you're using, how much the battery has to work with. But typically, from what I see is it's the payback for this is very short. For my own house, for example, I got a 4 kilowatt system, the solar PV, and the extra earnings from the social energy battery came out as £682 a year. So if you do the maths, you pay 4.5 grand and £680. So it's about 5, 6, 7 years, there or thereabouts. There is, of course, plus and minus depending on each individual property. The biggest earning battery system I've installed, social energy-wise, earns them over £800 a year. But really, to get a battery system that's just the right size is very difficult here in Scotland because of what Claire touched upon. Winter sucks, and you know, unfortunately, the weather in Scotland is mainly autumn. There's about 10 months of autumn, and then summer happens on a Tuesday, and then you know, rest is somewhere in between. So if you have a battery that's sized, May is the best month of the year. Today I have produced over 30 kilowatt hours of power. So if the battery is sized to cope with today, it's going to be empty most of the winter, and that's not good for your batteries. So the AI-enabled battery, it's always also maintaining the health of the battery by making sure it's charging and discharging and earning money in the process. Did it answer your question?
Yes, I think I understand it a bit better now. So I mean, if you're saying if you went for social energy, then you wouldn't need as big a battery as if you just had your own battery.
Yes, because there's thousands of them around, and every single kilowatt hour you produce from the pull from the grid is produced with solar.
Great, thank you, Tara.
No worries.
Okay, Dave, I have a question for you from Javier. He's asking in the matter of economics about the environmental invoice.
Yeah, I saw your question, Javier. Interesting concept, environmental invoice. Do you want to say a little bit about it? It's a new concept to me, but I think I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, well, basically, it is something that I think we are a little bit enforced to speak about, because everything is economics, and economics is not everything. How much will it cost to get rid of all the plastic that we have in the ocean? How much is it going to cost to get rid of all the CO2 that is now in the atmosphere? So that's a cost, and we need to put figures on that and start speaking about a more complex bill rather than the economic bill, which is a little bit simple.
Yeah, I'm totally behind you on that. And it is high time we start to recognize that. Just a small point of information for you all. You may notice on your bill that there's a small element called CCL charge. And the CCL charge is a climate change levy, which is imposed by the government. That money is gathered up by the government, and that is supposed to fund all of the energy saving measures. In practice, it goes to the exchequer, and of the £1 billion it raises every year, I think some 250 million is actually spent on the Energy Savings Trust. So there is a climate levy on your electric bill. It's just it's not being used for that purpose. But you're right, we have to seriously start factoring in the environmental cost of what we're doing.
Thank you.
If I may add my 2 pence worth to Javier, is it a perfect system? Do we have the whole environment saved by this? Absolutely not. But environmental bill, it doesn't address that problem really as much as we should, but it's probably one of the best things we can do at the moment. Like I read somewhere, you don't have to be self-sufficient in everything, just be self-sufficient in something. And the household battery storage systems are kind of nice in a way that the battery cells start their life as vehicle batteries, and you know, it's even a problem for manufacturers like Nissan, who predicted the life of the battery in a car would be around 7 years. But in reality, the car's batteries have lasted over 10 years. And after they are no longer good for car use, they get used as a household battery storage system, and they get another lease of life in that way. And like the social energy battery systems, they come with a 15-year warranty. So if this battery cell has already been in a vehicle somewhere for 10 years and another 15 years in a household, so it gets replaced, it's already served a very, very long life. And I am pretty sure that by the time you need to replace your battery stack in 15 years time, you are not going to be replacing it with a lithium ion battery stack. It will be something else, a hemp battery, seawater battery, carbon fiber battery, who knows? Or maybe you'll have a hydrogen fuel cell system in your house, which would actually fit the environmental bill perfectly. But yeah, this system isn't perfect, don't get me wrong.
Just as a comment that could be useful to know for everyone is there is a company called Gravitricity, and what they are using is just a mass coming up and down, and that's the way to store electricity in the form of potential energy. That's way less harmful, and is a very interesting way to store electricity that can perfectly match with your concept of social energy storage. Or I love that concept. Believe me, I love that concept. But I think that the battery component with heavy metals and with a bad recycling process and all that stuff is, I don't like that kind of stuff that is chemical storage in the form of chemical storage in batteries. I would like to think in other ways to store electricity, and in the form of potential energy is a fantastic way from to my understanding.
Yeah, like I said, it's not a perfect system, and if you really want to lose sleep, you look online to see how the cobalt and other precious metals are mined, and it is going to disturb you, and everybody should look at it, because we pretend here slavery doesn't exist. It does, and it's live and well. But it's you're kind of damned if you don't and damned if you do, if you know what I mean. So before we get hydrogen fuel cells in every house and on-site production with virtually no power, I think we have to just run what we have. And these battery cells have already been produced and used elsewhere. So by using a household battery system, you give them a second lease of life, preventing them to end up in a skip early. And batteries do get recycled, and there's commercial companies who do it. I'm pretty sure that's going to be quite a horrible process as well, but I haven't studied it.
Thanks for that, Terry. Dave, just to come back to your comment about CCL, I've had a question put in front of me that says the CCL, you gave the impression that the consumer pays for it. Is that right?
Yeah, the climate change levy is applied to your electric bill.
Are you saying that the consumer pays that?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, one of the audience has suggested that the householder doesn't pay that. Presumably, it's the electricity company.
No, well, everybody should be absolutely clear. Whatever the electricity company pays, we as a bill payer are paying. So all the switching services, all of these services, we're paying that bill. But unless they've taken the climate change levy off the bill in recent years, the climate change levy was introduced, I think, under the Labour government, and it is on everybody's bill, and it's about 0.5 pence per kilowatt hour. Now, my wife looks after the electricity bill, so I haven't looked at my bill for a rather long time. And I can't imagine they'll have given that up.
Okay, thanks for that, Dave.
But I just want to come back on Javier's comment about the gravitas. Pump storage is a gravity system, Javier. The issue with the batteries is industrial history tells us an awful lot. When a new technology becomes acceptable in the marketplace, all manner of innovations and developments kick in. And we're seeing that with batteries. We used supercapacitors way back in first about 2008 on a wind turbine. The developments in supercapacitors over this time have been colossal, and we wouldn't ever believed it possible. So I think the whole battery technology is changing. The new technologies from, I think, Heriot-Watt University, looking at hydrogen storage, it may transform that. So there's going to be a race between hydrogen and electrical storage, as opposed to mechanical electrical storage. And how that race is going to play out is anybody's guess, because the nanoparticle technology, nanotechnology stuff that's going on, and particularly in carbon, is just astonishing. Watch this space.
Well, thank you. You know, David, that my company has a device that can store electricity, but it's not as accessible as it could be gravitricity. So I'm just more focused in what people need to know, really, because that gravitricity tool is available today, and it is in the chat, by the way, if you want to explore and look for it on the website. It is quite easy to find videos about that, and it is a mass moving up and down. There's no you know, nowhere of any parts of or anything. It's just a mass moving up and down. So that will be there forever. And it's not the battery that has a lifespan, and there is, you know, a lot of processes that the battery is going to be degraded in time, and it will store less and less capacity, and it's using heavy metals and all that stuff. I don't like the idea of a chemical storage. As simple as that. Sorry.
That system is used in Africa already. It's generally used for lighting, power a small LED light, or also for powering the radio. And basically, it's like the weight you had in the old grandfather's clock. So you pull the weight up, and then you let the weight drop, and that drives a clockwork mechanism which produces the electricity. So you're spot on there.
If we can move on, but we're going to try and sort out this climate change levy, Dave. You did say you haven't looked at your electricity bill for a while. The audience is telling me that only businesses pay a climate change levy now. Householders don't do that anymore.
Okay, well, I'll stand corrected. The energy, the last time we looked at it, the CCL was raising $1 billion, and it wasn't being spent. But they've stopped doing it, because I remember seeing it on my bill years ago.
Okay, we'll move on with the questions. Bina, I've got a question from Clive. He lives in a terraced house. Do you want to go ahead, Clive?
Hello. Yes, I'm in a terraced house. You were talking about external and internal walls. So the adjoining wall between me and next door, does that count as internal or external?
Sorry, was that the joining wall between? So you're in a terraced house, and that's the adjoining wall between yourself and your neighbour. Is that right? Yeah. That is, I might get Dave to explain this a little bit better, but that's your party wall, which is treated in exactly the same way as an external wall is. Dave, do you want to say a little bit more about?
Yeah, the key here, Clive, is there a free air passage between the solum on the ground floor flat up the inside of the wall? So it's quite common when we're running cables to run a wire down the inside of the party wall because we can get all the way down very easily. And a lot of people think that a party wall, there's no temperature gradient between one room and your neighbor's room. conventional builds, that's the case. But if you've got airflow behind the party wall, and the way to test it is on a cold, windy day, if you can feel a draft around the light sockets or wall sockets, you've got airflow. In which case, the temperature gradient across your lath drops sharply. So it behaves like an external wall. It's not as bad, but it behaves like an external wall.
Okay, thank you.
Bina, sticking with you, I've got another question from Claire as to why your system is less disruptive than the competition. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah.
Claire?
If I may, sorry, Bina, can I ask you?
Yeah.
I mean, your system sounds fantastic. I mean, you say it's less disruptive and it's cheaper and all the rest, but I can't understand quite why it's less disruptive. It would have been fantastic to be able to see a video of how it's actually installed, but I understand that you're not at that stage yet. But if you think that with internal wall insulation, you still have to move the sockets, you still have to extend the windowsills and so forth, you still have to move stuff out of the room. And I can't understand why you wouldn't have to do that with yours, because you said you still have to move the sockets and so forth.
Yeah, I mean the sockets and so forth would come forward unless the customer was specifically asking them to be moved elsewhere or higher, etc. They would simply just come forward. In terms of being less disruptive, what we're focusing on here is a lath and plaster wall. Now, if you've ever changed anything or you know, lath and plaster in itself makes a tremendous amount of mess, and we're not removing the lath and plaster. We're not doing anything to the lath and plaster. The absolute minimum we would do is where we've taken a thermal imaging, we would maybe see where there are debris buildup causing cold bridges, and we would raggle that out by taking the skirting board off and taking an inch of the lath and plaster. And that's basically the gist of it. It's the amount of mess that is made with a lot of these other, the competition, if you like, means that often it can take a lot longer to clear up afterwards, and we're not having to do that. So you could effectively just move the furniture aside and do the work very quickly, and put the furniture back once the decorating has been done.
Thank you. Can I go on to ask one other point? I saw from the diagram you showed us, the graphic, that you put on timber battens and then you put your grid on. Why don't you use just the timber battens? I'm a bit confused here.
There are reasons for that. So the timber battens obviously attach themselves to the lath. David, I might get you to answer this one because it's to do with this is a little bit more technical.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Where you're in terms of mess, the Daub and Dab is the most similar system to ours, and it'll have as little mess as we have. So the Daub and Dab is fine. Daub and Dab works where the underlying lath is perfectly sound. Now, having analysed the structural integrity of the wall, we added the timber battens at a late stage in the process, having analysed it. And the reason for that is we wanted to pick up the vertical battens behind the lath, which are connected into the wall with dwangs. We wanted to get an attachment from our carrier system onto the actual wall through the dwangs. We can't predict the position of the vertical carrier frames. So if we don't put in the timber frames and we screw them in, we're screwing into the lath layer, not the vertical timber. So the purpose of it is so that we pick up the vertical battens behind the lath, which are attached to the wall, and then our carrier system pins onto our battens that we've applied, which are already anchored. And because we're doing that, we're giving that wall element an incredible structural integrity that the lath and plaster probably doesn't have, even if it's in good condition. So the structural integrity that we're imparting is that horizontal batten is part of that structural integrity. That's its purpose.
Thank you very much indeed. But can I go on to ask, why then do you need your carrier?
How are you going to carry the insulation? The purpose of the carrier is to hold the insulation board in place. And it's also the carrier for the plasterboard. So the plasterboard screws onto the carrier. The material of the carrier is chosen specifically to avoid thermal bridging. So it's a conventional construction technique which is used in internal partitioning for internal walls, structural partition walls in offices. But those carriers are made of steel. The last thing we want is to have a carrier in the middle of an insulation layer, which is made of steel, which is a massive a thermal bridge. So the purpose of the carrier is also to carry the plasterboard, and it's a choice that we've made as engineers. You could argue you could possibly use Dob and Dab or the Kingspan, I can't remember the cool term, and try and pick up those battens. But personally, I think it's untidy and structurally not very sound.
Thank you very much.
Bina, you're very popular this evening.
Wow.
Eric wants to raise a couple of points with you. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I've got a 70s house, which should be much better, but in practice is called brick wall with a gap and plasterboard on the inside. So the first question is, does that make sense to do it on something like that? Or does it make more sense just to rip off the plasterboard and put proper insulation against the wall? And the other question I have, that's more a curiosity thing, and that's because I don't have a granite house and I don't know exactly how they work, but I understand that there's often an issue also with draft under the floor and behind the walls, and I was just wondering whether you guys have a solution for that as well.
Yes, we do have a solution for that. As far as the system being used in 1970s housing, it's did you say it's a brick built?
Yeah.
Yeah. David, it can be used, can't it, in a 1970s? Yeah.
Part of the genesis of this was actually doing my son's bedroom, and my first son, I stripped out all the plasterboard and timber framed it. In son number 2, I laid it on top of it, and it made life so much simpler. It's down to the amount of work that you want to carry. In 1970s property, the rooms are going to be pretty large anyway, so the loss is going to be fairly insignificant. So it's really down to personal choice as the amount of work you're prepared to go to. It is a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah.
Eric?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Work where possible.
Thank you.
And the wall to floor issue, David, the wall to floor issue, because we've looked into this quite a bit, haven't we?
Yeah. Just a thing for you, in an old granite house, and you see the carpet, and you see the carpet to the skirting interface, and you're going to see a little grey line along that point. And have you ever wondered why you can never get it clean? You can never get rid of it. It's not actually dirt; it's a form of mold.
Okay.
That you get a small airflow through there. So at the bottom edge, that joint will be taped. So as we're putting in the insulation board, before the plasterboard layer goes on, that joint will be taped to prevent any airflow getting through that point. Now, for those of you who are in flats who've got noisy neighbors up above you, the carrier system is also very effective for carrying sound insulation boards. So you can insulate your flat from above by applying this to the surface of your own ceiling. And again, it's a very cheap and easy way of providing yourself with soundproofing. Otherwise, you have to go in below the plaster layer or under the neighbor's floorboards, which is not an easy job to do.
Okay, I've got a question from Adam, and it's more of a hypothetical into the room question than to any specific speakers. So Adam, do you want to go ahead?
You're on mute, Adam.
I thought I had to wait to be unmuted. Yes, as we save electricity or gas and our bills go down and down, then the standing charge becomes bigger and bigger proportion of it, whilst I presume your actual contribution to the cost of the grid goes down. Why doesn't your standing charge go down? Is there a way that the grid is actually costed, not a disincentive to save energy? Just a general question to those people who are working in this industry.
Well, at the risk of being controversial here, prior to the grid being privatized, this would have been less of an issue. But since the grid has been privatized, it's gone from being a technical system to becoming a financial system. And the financial system is geared around gouging every part of the market. Prior to privatization, there were no energy markets. There were no peak hour trading. There was none of that nonsense going on. And anytime we're paying for power trading during the day, we as bill payers are paying for it. And we're paying for the layers upon layers of administration. When it's a technical system, the purpose of it is just to cover its costs. Now, because it's a financial system, the desire for us now to go off grid is increasing. The more people that go off grid, the less revenues the oil utilities are going to come. And there's going to be a problem. And we're going to have to face that at some point. The same applies to petrol. As we move from petrol cars to electric cars, the revenue that the government is collecting is going to disappear. And as we decrease our energy demand on our homes, the bills that we're paying to the utilities is going to decrease. They're going to have to recover that from somewhere.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the government isn't just going to say, well, yeah, it was nice to get all that road tax when it was still there, but we're just gonna let it slide. And also, you know, the tax from the petrol, it was great when it lasted, but no more. I'm pretty sure they're gonna start, you know, putting a tax on how many miles you do on public roads. So they'll find a way. They'll find a way. There's no doubt. They're very clever in coming up with ways to tax you. So I think that's something you can rely on.
Yes, Sally, you're right, Taro.
Yeah, but the what was I going to say? Slipped my mind. Must have been important.
But somebody like Social Energy must have a view on this issue. There must be a disincentive for someone like Social Energy to get its product out there when the customers may save money on their electricity, but they're not going to save money on their standing charge.
Well, the standing charge will be still part of your electricity bill, but your electricity bill will be 70% reduced, well, up to. That's what they promise, and you know, their revenues literally comes from the savings and earnings the battery, the AI is able to generate by doing the grid balancing, and yeah, it seems to work very well. I've spoken to them, and they say, you know, their predictions have been accurate to a pound, or a fraction of a pound, even in some cases over the year. So the whatever they have developed in the system really does predict the circumstances very well. The hidden, I mean, the standing charge will be hidden there somewhere, but it'll just be massively reduced because of the earnings it makes by the grid balancing. And the same applies for the CCL on the domestic clients. Yes, you absolutely do pay for it, and businesses pay for it upfront. You will pay for it in a backhanded way. It's probably hidden into your standing charge. It's part of it, but there's no getting away from paying for these people who want your money. And the best thing to do is produce as much as you can on site and use it on site, and sell some of your power to them.
Thanks, Derek. Clive, do you still have your question on the grid?
Yes, well, it's not a question on the grid quite. Just this morning, I wonder if anybody listened to it. On Radio 4 at 9 o'clock this morning, you'll get it on the iPlayer. The Life Scientific was about Jim McDonald of Strathclyde University, who has spent most of his lifetime working on national grid control systems. So if anybody wants to listen to that, they can.
Clive, can you explain what the gist of the conversation was on the radio?
Basically about his, he started off work for the South of Scotland Electricity Board, the forerunner of Scottish Power, and since then he's worked at Strathclyde University in conjunction with electricity boards, developing systems for controlling the energy flow in the grid, and probably had a hand in the design of the things we saw on the video, control stations.
Okay, and which channel was that on?
That's Radio 4, BBC Radio 4.
Radio 4, 9 o'clock this morning?
Yes.
All right. So anybody interested in that, chase down iPlayer, or is it now BBC Sounds? Apparently, and as I say, Radio 4, 9 o'clock.
I won't risk because I don't pay TV license, and I will not pay, so I stay away from that. But the it's an interesting topic, and like I said, social energy is the first one to do this in a large commercial scale, and a lot of other companies are right behind them. And this is probably the way the grid is going to be. And well, hopefully, in not too distant future, the national grid will actually become somewhat obsolete. If local microgrids pop up here and there, and my personal prediction remains as it has always been, it is going to start in Africa, probably Nigeria, and spread from there, making the grid actually obsolete.
Can I just make a point? The radio license was abolished about 50 years ago. You don't need a license to listen to BBC Radio, only BBC television.
It actually covers the iPlayer aspect as well, I'm afraid, but yeah, like I said, they are very good at squeezing money out of you, so I won't risk it. I just won't. If I need propaganda, I go to the internet and look for it.
Okay, there are no more questions in the queue. Here's an opportunity for any last moment thoughts before I hand back to Alison.
I just wanted to say thank you, Alison, and the rest of the Climate Cafe group for organising this. I think considering it was the first time that you've done it this way, I think it was successful. Yeah, thank you for inviting me to come along and speak.
Well, I think a huge thank you to all the speakers. It was really interesting. I learned a lot. I'm going to be looking up social energy and graviticity, among other things. We have actually, we're talking about microgrids and everything, and we did put a response in, ACA put a response into the National Planning Framework consultation exercise that closed last Thursday. We have it on a website, don't we, Eric? So it does mention the fact that we feel that distributed local energy networks are the way of the future, and that's something that can be seen from what Dave was saying on his slides as well, with the amount of loss of energy that we get from using the traditional methods of centralized electricity grids. So if you are interested, then do check it out on our webpage. You can see our response about what we feel, how we feel the planning, and the way we actually manage the whole of our country should change. There are a lot more consultations going on, and if you are interested, we can put them up on our Facebook page and on our webpage. But have a look at the Scottish Government website, because there is, as I say, quite a lot going on at the moment there. For any of you that want to chat more with David, as I said at the beginning, we're doing something slightly different this time. There's a kind of follow-on discussion on Thursday, so 2 days time at 7 o'clock, 7 till 8. And the link is on our Facebook page on the event that we've created for that very day, Thursday, the 7th at 7 p.m. Also, I had a request from Aberdeen Cycle Forum that there is a council vote tomorrow about the kind of dualling, as it were, of South College Street, and they would like us to, or anybody to speak to the councillors to say, can we put sustainable travel first, not cars? And they're actually going to push through quite a lot at that meeting, I think, in relation to roads and putting money to roads to help with COVID recovery. So I think it's important that we right here and now talk to our elected representatives, local and further afield, to say what we want post lockdown and in the future for COVID. And there's a lot of economic recovery discussion and decisions going on at the moment. And what we feel in ACA is that, that it needs to come with climate first. And so we need to be talking about the changes we need to put in place now. And there's a lot of discussion at the moment about widening the pavements and widening cycling paths, but also in relation to money given, we need to be saying that there needs to be carbon reduction conditions applied to those. So please do look on our Facebook. I'll put it up there if you want to have more details about speaking to council at tomorrow's vote. Thank you, everybody. There's quite a lot on the chat. Eric's put on the link to the consultation. Taro's given more information. Go on to novaselements.com. And we've also got some discussion from Javier too. So please do have a wee look there. We have recorded this cafe. We will be putting it onto our webpage and putting the links onto our social media as well. Thank you very much. To say, if you've got any more questions, then you know where we are on Thursday. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.